The vastness between stars was never truly empty. It held dust, faint whispers of radiation, and the occasional ship. The Turelian harvest fleet was a swarm of ships, moving like a school of deep-sea predators. Their hulls were not metal, but a dark, chitinous material grown from biology, not built. They slid out of their faster-than-light travel with a shiver of displaced energy. The yellow sun of Sol hung before them, small and unremarkable. On the bridge of the command ship, Commander Kale flexed his four-fingered hands. His large, dark eyes reflected the dull star. Another backwater system. His voice clicked and buzzed. Primitive radio noise. Simple chemical rockets. Standard harvest protocol. He felt bored. This was a routine operation, a milk run. Their sensors, which tasted the space around them, had long ago picked up the old television and radio broadcasts from Earth. They spoke of many nations, of wars with simple explosives, of a species barely off its own planet, perfect for the harvest. Send in the forward scouts, Kale ordered. 3 vessels. Full sensor sweep of the inner planets. Find their orbital defenses, their shipyards. Map it all. He expected to see cluttered space stations, perhaps a few outdated satellites. Easy targets. The 3 scout ships detached from the main fleet. They were sleek and sharp, like stingers. They moved silently on pulses of energy, heading towards the warmth of the inner system. They passed the cold, gaseous giants Jupiter-Saturn. Their scans noted small, automated human stations on some moons. The stations were simple, mining for ice and minerals. The scouts marked them for later silencing, a trivial task. There was no reaction from them. No signals, no movement dot as the scouts crossed the rocky debris of the asteroid belt. Their long-range sensors finally pinned with concentrated activity around the 3rd planet. The planet was a vibrant blue and green, a jewel. Around it, a cloud of objects glittered. Not just a few stations, but hundreds, maybe thousands of platforms. They formed a complex web, a necklace of silent metal. On one of those platforms, a man named Jin sat in a quiet room. The room was warm and lit by soft, blue lights from many screens. Jin was from Korea. He had a kind face, but right now his eyes were heavy with the long, dull hours of his shift. His job was to watch, to monitor the streams of data from the silent sensors placed far out in the dark, beyond Pluto. A gentle musical chime sounded in the room. It was not loud or alarming. It was a specific clear tone Jin had heard only in training simulations. He blinked, his tiredness gone in an instant. On his main screen, a new window opened automatically. Text scrolled, cold and official. Unidentified extrasolar contact. Vector. Inbound from. Neptunian orbit. Multiple signatures. Protocol. Silent watcher. Initiated. Jin's mouth felt dry. This was not a drill. The tags said the objects were moving fast, with energy signatures that were all wrong for human engines. They were not broadcasting any identification signals. His fingers flew over the console, locking the data stream, confirming the reading. He touched the communication panel. Control, this is Jin on Watchtower 7. Silent Watcher is active. I have 3 boogies, maybe more, coming from the belt. They are not ours. The response came quickly. The voice belonged to Sumin, his supervisor. She was calm, always calm. Acknowledged, Jin. We see it on the deep network. Confirm passive sensors only. Do not activate targeting scans. Do not paint them with any energy. Just watch. Jin nodded to himself. Understood. Passive only. He changed the view on his screens. The powerful active radar and LiDAR systems on the platform remained dark and cold. Instead, he relied on the tiny, sensitive listening posts scattered across the system. devices that just soaked up the light and energy that already existed in space. He was an eavesdropper in the void. He watched the 3 alien scouts move closer. They were beautiful and strange on the spectral display. They began to activate their own sensors. Bright lances of scanning energy, invisible to the human eye, but clear to Jin's instruments, swept out from the ships. They washed over Earth's orbital platforms. Jin held his breath. This was the moment. Would they see the truth? But the platforms gave nothing back. They were dark, cold hunks of metal and ceramic to the active scans. No power readings, no engine heat, no electronic whispers. They looked like ancient, dead relics, leftovers from a busier time. The alien scans passed over them and focused on the planet below, on the cities and the heat of civilization. Jin saw the scouts change formation. They moved confidently now, coming even closer, diving into high orbit. They were taking pictures, sampling the atmosphere, acting like they owned the place. A slow heat built in Jin's chest. It wasn't fear. It was something else. It was the feeling of watching a predator step onto clearly marked land. Not knowing the ground was mined, he sent all the data to Olympus. Olympus was not a place on any map. It was the command network, buried deep, run by the unified council of what used to be separate nations. The response from Olympus was faster than light, carried by particles that were connected across any distance. A single word appeared in the center of Jin's screen, glowing softly. Await. On the Tyrrelian scout ship, the pilot clicked in satisfaction. The data streamed back to the main fleet. Orbital structures are inert, he reported. No significant energy signatures. No defensive grid. Planetary population centers are dense and technologically primitive, consistent with earlier broadcasts. The system is undefended. Recommend immediate harvest. Back at the edge of the system, Commander Kale received the report. He felt a flicker of disappointment. No fight, just another collection. Prepare the main fleet for movement, he announced to his crew. We will proceed to the 3rd planet and begin the seeding of the spore. Another world for the harvest. The massive organic armada began to stir, turning its many eyes towards the bright blue dot. They saw a quiet, divided, and soft world. They saw exactly what humanity, over generations of silent, patient work, had decided to show them. Jin watched from his silent room as the 3 alien scouts, their work done, turned to rejoin their mother fleet. He watched the giant swarm of contacts at the system's edge begin to move inward. He looked at the word on his screen. AWAIT. He leaned back in his chair, the quiet hum of the station the only sound. The wait, he knew, was almost over. The first move had been made by the visitors. Now it was the house's turn. The 3 Tyrrelian scouts finished their work. They had mapped the orbital graveyard, tasted the atmosphere, and counted the heat signatures of cities. Their reports painted a clear picture for the harvest fleet, a soft, rich world ready for picking. They turned and sped back towards the asteroid belt, eager to lead the armada to the prize. On Watchtower 7, Jin's screen was a mosaic of data. He watched the scouts leave, their confidence clear in their straight, fast course. He then shifted his view to the main swarm of alien ships. They were moving now, like a dark cloud drifting towards the sun. His heart beat a steady, heavy rhythm in his chest. The quiet part of the job was over. Deep underground, in a bunker carved into granite beneath the Korean peninsula, the air was cool and carried the faint smell of ozone. Suman stood before a large, curved holographic display. The display showed the entire solar system. The tiny, angry red dots of the Tyrrelian fleet were creeping inward from the edge. Around her, men and women from different former nations watched silently. A man from Russia, his face lined, studied the vectors. A woman from Brazil tracked the energy outputs. They took the bait, the Russian said, his voice a low rumble. They see only the quiet. Sumin nodded. Her hands were clasped behind her back, tight to stop them from trembling. Not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. Their arrogance is their blindness. They think because we did not shout, we have no voice. Because we did not show teeth, we have no bite. She turned to a young technician at a console. Status of the lace? The technician, a woman named Hana, replied without looking up. All gravity lens generators are powered and aligned. Coordinates are locked. They are holding at the threshold. The weapon was not. Called something fierce like Starbreaker or Doomlance. It was named for what it did, the gravity lace. It was not a beam to burn or a missile to explode. Its principle was simpler and more cruel. It used immense power to twist the fabric of space itself, just slightly, in very specific places. It made gravity, the quietest force, into a wall or a pit or a blade. The Turelian harvest fleet moved in a loose formation. Commander Kale watched the blue planet grow larger on his view screen. He felt a mild interest. The harvest was necessary for his people's survival, but it held little glory. This one would be especially simple. He gave the order. Prepare the primary spore dispersers. Target the largest population centers. We will soften the biosphere before the ground teams land. On the lead ships, organic pods began to pulse with a sickly green light, filling with a biological agent that would dissolve complex animal life. They were minutes from firing range dot in the bunker. Sumin took a slow breath. They are committing to the approach. They are not sending more scouts. They are bringing everything. She looked at the faces around the room. There was no excitement, only grim resolve. Activate the lace. Phase 1 only. Let's give them a hint that the garden has thorns. Hannah's fingers danced. Activating. Firing sequence initiated. Out in the dark, near the orbit of Mars, space seemed to shimmer. It was a distortion visible only to sensitive instruments. To the Turelian fleet, their sensors suddenly screamed with warnings. Gravity, which had been a smooth curve towards the sun, became chaotic. It was as if space had developed sudden, invisible knots. For the lead Turelian scout ships, it was instant disaster. One moment they were gliding smoothly. The next, the space in front of them folded. The ship did not hit anything. Instead, the gravity in front of it multiplied 1,000-fold for a fraction of a second. The ship was crushed inward like a soda can in a giant's fist. It vanished in a puff of debris. A second scout tried to veer away from the disturbance. But the gravity field wasn't a point. It was a pattern of lace. The ship was sheared in half by conflicting tidal forces, its two pieces spinning away into the dark. The third scout was luckier, or perhaps unluckier. A loop of twisted space grabbed it and flung it, like a slingshot, away from the sun. It tumbled, engines dead, on a new and terrible course out towards the cold grasp of Jupiter. Its communications array was shattered, but its data recorders, traumatized and damaged, still weakly tried to make sense of what had happened. They recorded no energy weapon, no impact. They recorded only space itself turning against them. On the command ship, Commander Kale jerked back as the fleet's sensor net exploded with panic and confusion. 2 scouts were just gone. A third was hurled into the void. There was no flash of plasma, no missile trail. It was clean, silent, and terrifying. What was that? He clicked, his mandibles stiff. Report. What hit them? His science officer's voice was strained. Unknown, Commander. No energy signatures. No projectile signatures. It appears the local space-time geometry became violently unstable. It is not a weapon we recognize. Kale felt the first cold prick of something he had never felt in a harvest: doubt. This was not the work of primitive apes. This was something else. Something that did not fight directly, but changed the rules of the battlefield itself. His pride, however, was a fierce fire. To be tricked by these quiet creatures was unthinkable. To retreat now was an eternal shame, a defensive anomaly, he declared, forcing certainty into his voice. A last-ditch planetary shield. It is localized. It drained their power to create it. They have shown their only trick. The rest of their space is empty. Full fleet, advance. Maximum speed. We will overwhelm this region before they can reactivate it. The order went out. The remaining 97 ships of the Harvest Fleet powered their drives, glowing with angry biological light. They surged forward, a wave of chitin and menace, heading straight for the area where their scouts had died. Kale believed he was calling a bluff. He was charging a trap that had already been sprung. Back on Watchtower 7, Jin watched the massive fleet accelerate. He saw the 2 scout signals vanish, and the third fly wildly off course. A small, hard smile touched his lips. They didn't like the welcome mat, he whispered to the empty room. Suman's voice came over his calm as ever. They are proceeding as predicted. Phase 1 was a warning they chose to ignore. Stand by for Phase 2. Jin looked at his screen, at the swarm of red dots now moving with aggressive purpose into the heart of the system. He watched the data from the gravity-laced generators. They were cycling, building power for a much larger, much more precise pattern. The lace had been a single thread, a tripwire. Now they were preparing the whole net. The Tyrrelian fleet moved deeper, past the twisted space that had killed the scouts. They met no further resistance. Kale's confidence returned. It had been a fluke, a spent defense. He looked at the blue planet, so close now. Ready the spore dispersers, he ordered again. Target lock. We end this now. In the bunker, Suman watched the hologram. The entire enemy fleet was now inside the kill zone, a region of space between Mars and the asteroid belt that had been quietly prepared for a century. She looked at Hana and gave a single small nod. Phase 2, Hana said, her voice clear in the quiet room. Activating the full lace, pattern, encirclement, and collapse. Outside, in the silent dark, hundreds of hidden platforms hummed with energy. They did not aim at the ships. They aimed at the space around the ships. And then they began to stitch. The Tyrrelian fleet was a dark storm in the silent sea of space. Commander Kale watched his forward screens, expecting to see the panicked flare of human engines, the pathetic spark of primitive missiles. He saw nothing. Only the steady, unworried glow of the blue planet ahead and the cold pinpricks of dead orbital platforms. The strange event that destroyed his scouts was behind them. It must have been a fluke, a natural anomaly. These creatures were hiding, hoping to be overlooked. His mandibles clicked in irritation. They would learn. All ships achieve firing positions. His voice buzzed across the fleet. Power the spore dispersers. We will paint their continents with the end of their species. On the lead ships, the organic weapon pods swelled, glowing with a toxic greenish light. The weapon inside was a masterpiece of biological horror, designed to unravel complex animal DNA within hours. They were seconds from the order to fire. Deep in the underground bunker, the air was perfectly still. Suman stood before the holographic display, a statue of calm. The red swarm of enemy icons was now perfectly positioned, clustered in the space humanity had secretly marked as their killing field. The Russian officer's hands were clenched into fists. The Brazilian woman held her breath. They are fully committed, Suman said, her voice barely louder than a whisper. It was not a statement to the room, but a final confirmation to herself. They see no threat. They are aiming their weapons at our home. She turned to Hana at the control console. Her next words were simple and carried the weight of a world. Release Saul's hammer. Hana's fingers, which had been poised above the console, now moved. She did not press a button. She entered a long, complex authorization code, then placed her palm on a glass panel. A soft light scanned her prints and the veins in her hand. The system chimed a clear, high note. Authorization confirmed. Command accepted. Firing sequence irreversible. Initiating Saul's hammer. The command did not travel by radio wave or laser beam. It jumped instantaneously across the solar system through linked quantum particles. The order arrived at the same precise moment on the Sun, at Mercury, and at a network of relay stations hidden in the solar corona. On the surface of the Sun, humanity's greatest and most terrible project awoke. It was not a weapon built in orbit. It was a sculpture carved into the star itself over generations. Vast magnetic field generators, constructed by self-replicating machines smaller than dust motes, floated in the Sun's lower atmosphere. They had waited, silent and patient, for this single moment. They activated. A complex magnetic funnel, wider than the planet Jupiter, began to form in the Sun's fiery plasma. It did not create a random eruption. It shaped one. It gathered a titanic river of superheated matter, a concentrated strand of the Sun's own fury, and gave it a direction. With a silent, universe-bending push, a spear of star stuff was lanced away from the Sun's surface. It was not a wide, spreading explosion. It was a focused beam of pure solar plasma, 1 billion degrees hot, moving at a significant fraction of light speed. Its target was not the Tyrrhenian fleet. Its target was the point in space the fleet currently occupied. The light of the eruption reached Earth in 8 minutes. But the effect of the hammer was faster, mediated by the manipulated gravity fields of the lace. The gravity lace platforms, which had woven a trap of twisted space, now did something else. They formed a lens, a funnel. They reached out and subtly guided the incoming torrent of stellar fire, bending its path with gravity to ensure it did not miss a single ship. On the Tyrrhenian command ship, the first warning was not a visual sighting. It was a scream from the science officer. Cataclysmic stellar event. The star it is projecting. A directed coronal mass ejection. Unprecedented scale. Energy levels. They are off the scale. Kale swung to the main viewer. The Sun, which had been a steady yellow disk, now showed a terrible, beautiful bloom of white light on its surface. A thin, impossibly bright thread seemed to stretch out from it, faster than thought, heading directly for them. It was not like any weapon he knew. It was not a laser or a projectile. It was a piece of a star, hurled across space. Evasive maneuvers. Full power to shields. He shrieked, his clicks turning into a screech dot. It was too late. The gravity lace held them, just for a critical moment, in a web of subtle forces. They could not scatter fast enough. The leading edge of Saul's hammer, a wave of radiation and charged particles, hit first. It washed over the fleet like a tsunami of light. Sensor arrays blinded and melted. Shield generators, designed to deflect energy beams and plasma bolts, were overwhelmed in an instant by the raw, astronomical power. They flickered and died, overloading in a cascade of failures. Then the main body of the plasma spear arrived. There was no sound in the vacuum. There was only light. A light so pure and fierce it turned the black space white. The Tyrrhenian ships, their organic hulls designed for toughness and self-repair, did not explode. They were simply erased. They vaporized instantly, their complex biology reduced to its basic atoms in a flash of starfire. One moment there was a fleet of nearly 100 ships. The next, there was an expanding cloud of incandescent gas. quickly cooling and dissipating into the eternal cold. Commander Kale had one final, clear thought as the white light filled his view screen, washing out the image of the blue planet he had meant to conquer. He understood. They had not stumbled upon a primitive world. They had trespassed in a fortress. The humans had not built a navy to meet them in battle. They had turned their very sun into a gun, and their solar system into the barrel. It was not a fight. It was an extermination. Then thought and light became one, and then became nothing. On Earth, the effect was beautiful. The plasma wave, carefully shaped by the lace, washed through the outer solar system, its deadly focus spent on the fleet. The energized particles that swept past Earth were filtered and tamed by the planet's magnetic field. They danced with the atmosphere, painting the sky's dot in cities all over the world. People stepped outside or looked from their windows. The night sky, from pole to pole, erupted in waves of shimmering color. Brilliant greens, vivid purples, and deep reds pulsed and flowed in silent, breathtaking curtains of light. It was the most spectacular aurora in human history. Children pointed, couples held hands, and old men smiled at the wonder of it dot on Watchtower 7. Jin saw the alarms on his board go quiet. The swarm of red dots was gone, wiped clean from the tactical display. He saw only the gentle, steady green lights of human infrastructure. He stood up, his legs feeling weak, and walked to the observation window. Outside, the silent platforms hung against the starry black. And below, the skies of Earth were alive with dancing, silent fire. He put his hand against the cold glass. It was over. The garden's thorns had been made of starfire, and they had drawn blood from the void itself. The silence that followed was profound. In the bunker deep underground, the holographic display showed only the steady, peaceful orbits of planets and human stations. The angry red swarm of the Tyrrelian fleet was gone, scrubbed from the map as if it had never been. The only evidence was a residual energy signature, a fading heat smear in the space between Mars and Jupiter. Already cooling into the background noise of the Cosmos dots zoom in did not cheer. No one in the room did. They watched the data for a long time, confirming and reconfirming. No debris larger than a molecule. No escape pods. No frantic final signals. Total and complete annihilation. The Russian officer let out a long, slow breath, the sound loud in the quiet. The Brazilian woman closed her eyes for a moment, her lips moving in what might have been a prayer or a curse. Signal Olympus, Sumin said, her voice sounding rough from disuse. Primary threat eliminated. Saul's hammer successful. No secondary contacts detected. Acknowledgement came back. A simple text on the main screen. Confirmed. Stand down to Watcher Protocol 1 dot around the room. Technicians began the slow, methodical process of powering down the weapon systems. The gravity-laced platforms went dormant, their subtle fields dissolving. The magnetic projectors on the sun disengaged, letting the star return to its natural, unfocused fury. The silence felt different now. It was no longer the silence of waiting, but the silence after a storm. Sumin turned and walked to a small private lift. The doors opened, and she stepped inside. The lift rose slowly through layers of rock and concrete for a full minute before opening into a simple, above-ground observation dome. It was day. The sky was a clear, pale blue. Jin was already there, standing by the curved glass, looking out at the mountains. He heard her approach, but didn't turn. "The auroras are fading," he said quietly. They were beautiful. Sumin came to stand beside him. The vibrant colors that had painted the night were now just faint, shimmering ghosts in the daylight sky, like the memory of a dream. "A side effect," she said. "The beautiful face of an ugly thing." They stood in silence for a while, watching the ordinary world. Birds flew between trees. A light wind rustled the grass. It was all so normal. It was impossible to reconcile this peaceful scene with what had just happened 500 million kilometers away. Did they understand? Jin asked finally. At the end, did they know what hit them? Sumin considered. She thought of the sensor logs, the last chaotic readings from the Tyrrelian command ship, the sudden, terrifying recognition of a stellar event aimed like a weapon. I think the commander understood. He understood that he had made a fatal mistake. He thought he was hunting prey. He didn't know he was walking into a mouth. Jin shivered, despite the sun's warmth on the glass. And now? We just go back to watching? That is all we have ever done, Sumin said. She looked at him, her face tired but calm. For over a century, the great project of our species was not to explore the stars, not to build a grand federation. It was to hide, to be quiet, to build a single, perfect trap and make our whole home look like the bait. She turned back to the window. We succeeded today, but the watch never ends. Someone else might hear the silence and come to investigate. Down on Earth, life continued. The news feeds, carefully managed by the Unified Council, spoke of a magnificent, unexpected solar storm that had gifted the planet with historic auroras. Scientists gave cheerful interviews about solar cycles. People posted pictures of the colored skies on social networks, with hearts and wonderstruck emojis. There were parties under the dancing lights. It was a global moment of awe. No one spoke of alien fleets. No one whispered about weapons made from stars. The truth was a quiet weight carried by a select few in bunkers and watchtowers. The gardeners knew what they had done to the rabbits. The rest of the world simply enjoyed the unexpected beauty of the garden. Days turned into weeks. On Pluto, at the very edge of the system, a man named Day went about his work. His station was little more than a pressurized hut next to a cluster of telescopes and listening antennas. It was lonely, cold work. His job was to monitor the Oort cloud, the vast shell of icy objects that marked the true frontier of the sun's influence. Today, he had a special task. A small, stealthy probe had arrived at his station, delivered by a high-speed drone weeks before. It contained a data core. They took the core and loaded it into a simple, rugged launch tube that pointed away from the sun into the endless dark. The tube held a single buoy. It was not armed. It carried no engine for return. It had a small push plate for initial acceleration and a minimal guidance system. Its only payload was a memory bank and a powerful, omnidirectional transmitter. Day received the command authorization from Olympus. It was a string of numbers and a single word, broadcast. He initiated the launch sequence. With a soft puff of gas, the buoy was ejected from the tube. Once it was a safe distance away, its push plate activated, a brief, steady pulse of force that sent it gliding outwards, towards the stars. It would travel for years, decades maybe, until it reached a point humanity had calculated was a natural crossroads of galactic drift. Then it would wake up. It would broadcast its message on a loop, on every frequency, in every way imaginable. The message was not a warning in words. It was a data packet. It contained the cleaned, clear sensor logs from the Tyrrelian scouts' initial approach, the images of a seemingly defenseless Earth, the quiet orbital platforms, the unguarded wealth of a planet. That data played out, calm and inviting. Then the packet showed the exact moment the Tyrrelian fleet moved in to attack. And then it showed the total, catastrophic, and instantaneous termination of every single signal. The end of the data was not an explosion or a message. It was silence. A full, empty, deafening silence following the promise of an easy harvest. It was a story told without a single lie. They came. They saw what we let them see. They attacked. And then they ceased to exist. They watched the buoy's signal dwindle on his tracker until it vanished into the background static. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of his station. They were not sending a declaration of war. They were not sending a greeting. They were planting a seed of dread in the galactic dark. A tale of a quiet system where visitors vanished without a trace, without a reason any normal species could understand. He turned back to his monitors, to the endless, quiet data stream from the edge of nothing. The watch continued. The Sol system hung in space, peaceful, blue, and inviting. Its radio signals were still quaint, its surface seemingly divided. But now there was a new truth traveling into the void. A truth that said this garden was not undefended. It was digesting. The buoy sailed on into the endless dark. It was a small, gray object, barely larger than a man, shaped like a smooth stone. For years, it fell through the silent ocean between stars, powered only by its initial push and the gentle, invisible tugs of distant galaxies. Inside its shielded core, a clock counted down. Finally, in the deep quiet of interstellar space, far beyond the last whisper of the sun's warmth, the clock reached zero. The buoy woke up. It ran a simple systems check, found everything in order, and began its only task. It started to broadcast. It did not send a focused signal towards any specific star. It broadcast in all directions, a gentle, omnidirectional whisper into the cosmic background. The transmission repeated over and over, on a loop. The transmission was not a message of peace. It was not a declaration of war. It contained no language to translate, no images of smiling humans or maps of the solar system. It was pure, unedited data. First, it played the sensor logs. These were the clean, clear readings taken from the Turelian scouts during their initial, confident approach. They showed the blue-green planet, rich with water and life. They showed the silent, seemingly derelict orbital platforms. They showed the heat blooms of cities, the crisscrossing of simple aircraft, the faint and chaotic radio chatter of a divided pre-spaceflight species. The data painted a picture of perfect, ripe, and undefended prey. It was an invitation, written in the universal language of scanner returns. Then, the data stream showed the Turelian fleet moving in. The massive swarm of biological signatures, the powering of weapon systems, the clear, aggressive intent. The moment of attack initiation was marked dot, and then the data stopped dot, not with an explosion, not with a distress call, not with the flash of weapons fire dot. It stopped with total, absolute, and instantaneous termination. Every signal from every Turelian ship ceased at the same precise microsecond. One moment there was a fleet of advanced warships. The next, there was nothing. Not even debris, large enough to register. Just the empty, peaceful sensor silence of the solar system, exactly as it was before. The broadcast looped back to the beginning, to the image of the quiet, tempting world, and started again. It was a ghost story for machines. A chilling tale told without a single word. Back in the solar system, life settled into its old rhythm, but the rhythm had changed. The great secret, held by so few for so long, was now a permanent part of human history. There were no medals, no parades for the people in the bunkers and watchtowers. Their reward was the continued silence. Jin eventually left orbital duty. He returned to Earth, to a small town in the countryside. He took a job maintaining weather satellites, a peaceful, simple life. Sometimes, on very clear nights, he would go outside and look up. He would see the bright, steady dot of Jupiter, or the red glow of Mars. He would remember the red dots on his screen, and the beautiful, terrible auroras that followed their erasure. He felt no pride, only a hollow sense of awe at what his species had chosen to become. They were not explorers. They were gardeners who had learned to make the soil itself bite. Suman remained with the watch. She was promoted, given oversight of an entire hemisphere's early warning network. Her hair turned gray, but her eyes stayed the same calm and watchful. She trained new technicians, young men and women, like Chin had been. She never lied to them in training. "We are not the galaxy's guardians," she would say. "We are its quiet warning. Our only task is to ensure that if something comes, it meets the same silent end. We are the keepers of the lesson." The lesson was a simple one. Humanity had looked into the dark and decided not to build a brighter light, but a darker shadow. They had fused their entire civilization's ingenuity into a single perfect hidden defense. A defense that did not threaten, but simply eliminated. It was the ultimate expression of leave us alone. On Pluto, Day finished his tour of duty. He was the last human to touch the system that had launched the buoy. Before he left on the long shuttle back to the inner worlds, he took one last walk outside his station in his heated suit. The sky here was not black, but a deep, endless velvet sprinkled with 1 billion cold, sharp stars. The sun was just a very bright star, lost in the crowd. He looked in the direction the buoy had gone. Though he knew it was far beyond sight, he wondered what, if anything, would find the buoy's signal. Would it be another harvest fleet, driven by hunger and arrogance? Would it be a curious explorer, a scientist species? Would they understand the data? Would they see the quiet planet and the vanished fleet and feel a chill of primal warning? Or would they, like the Tyrellian commander Kale, see only the prize and ignore the silence that had swallowed those who came before? He hoped they would be wise. He hoped they would see the story for what it was, not a challenge, but a statement of fact. This is what happens here. The Sol system from the outside looked no different. It was a normal yellow star with planets. If you listened on the radio frequencies, you heard old broadcasts, the echoes of 100 years past. You heard music and news and confusion. You saw no great fleets, no megastructures. It was the picture of a species still in its cradle. But now, in the vast and ancient library of the galaxy, a new page had been added. It was not a page about conquest or glory. It was a page about silence. The coordinates of the Sol system were now tagged with a cryptic, machine-told ghost story. A story that ended not with a bang, but with an endless, echoing quiet. The buoy continued its broadcast, a whisper in the dark. And back on the quiet, blue planet, under its gentle sun, humanity tended its garden. They lived, loved, and dreamed, just as they always had. But above them, woven into the fabric of their space, was a hidden net. And in the heart of their sun slept a hammer. They waited, not with fear, but with the calm patience of something that has already proven it cannot be eaten. They were the trap. They were the lesson. And they would wait, for eternity if necessary, for the next visitor to read the tale of those who entered the Sol system, and nothing returned to tell the tale.